With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Hey, listen to this. All I needed was a new starter. Got a great deal on eBay. Did it myself.
Yeah, that's cool. But how about the soft purr of an upgraded exhaust when it fits just right?
For me, it's the little things. Like these new windshield wipers from eBay I installed.
From small fixes to big upgrades, eBay has all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay. Things people love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent, savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast Gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast Gems.
AI is moving fast. So fast, it's hard to keep up. In fact, in ServiceNow's latest AI Maturity Index, scores dipped 20% from last year. But that's okay, because AI isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. You may be behind today, but tomorrow you could be a pace setter. Dive into ServiceNow's AI Maturity Index and see how you can innovate as fast as your ambitions. Visit servicenow.com/AI maturity.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This is the Reversing Climate Change podcast. I'm Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of the show. Today's sponsor is Arbonix. We need a lot more forestry projects in order to prevent the worst of climate change. Forestry is not an easy thing to get right. I come from the world of soil organic carbon, also a tricky thing, but we really need to figure out how to make the terrasphere hold more carbon for longer. I'm honored to share that goal with Arbonix, who's doing amazing work in Europe for forestry. There are actually not that many forestry projects within carbon markets that even take place in Europe at this point. In 2024, there's only 0.5% of the 13 million Vera credits coming from European forest carbon projects. So it's pretty rare. Arbonix is one of the few groups out there trying to make credible, high-quality forestry projects make sense in a European context. If you'd like to learn more about just how Arbonix is going to market, how they're thinking, what opportunities they see to make high-quality forestry projects make sense, they just released a new report on the state of European forest carbon credits in 2025. It's a practical guide to how forest credits are generated, verified, and how developers handle permanence, leakage, and social integrity within Europe, comparing against methodologies and registries and figuring out how they differ, how pricing works, and the timing of these projects and when to even get involved in them is pretty difficult work. It's laborious work to understand. If you're a CSO, you're working at a company, you don't have a lot of time to wrap your head around these things. It's nice that Arbonix has basically drawn you a map that you can refer to so you can quickly understand forestry projects in Europe, how do they actually work, and of the choices that are available, what you should choose and for what. Go check out Arbonix, check out their report. I'll put the link in the show notes for that too. Listen to the episode I did with Lizette, and thanks so much for listening. Here is your show. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm happy you're listening to this podcast. My name is Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of Reversing Climate Change. Been a carbon removal and climate tech entrepreneur for about 8 years now. And I'm happy to be doing a show with my friend and colleague, Marian Krueger. Marian is the co-founder and managing director of Remove. Remove is a nonprofit based in Zurich and Amsterdam. They have 3 accelerator programs right now for carbon removal. One is in Europe, one is in Africa, and one is in India. Their role is to prepare entrepreneurs to build companies around carbon removal, to help them understand the market, help them figure out their go-to-market, help them understand the policy landscape, what to do, basic entrepreneurial skills, what one needs to know about raising money, things that are common for accelerator programs. I am a startup coach there with them. I love working in accelerator programs and I love working in Remove. If you're in any of those geographies and you are laboring to start a carbon removal company, you should get in touch with Remove. They do amazing work. Marian and I talk about so many things, but the jumping off point for today is his book, which was originally published in German, has now been translated into English. It's called Race to Zero: How Companies Can Lead the Way to Climate Neutrality, written by Marian Krueger, today's guest, and Benedict Probst, who is the co-author of the book. The show starts off by talking about why it's sometimes important to revisit introductory texts. Marian makes some joke about how I'm not the intended audience of the book. I disagree, because I think it's actually really nice to go back. And as someone who cares about communication, it's nice to see how someone else presents the case for carbon removal, especially in novel ways or to new audiences, coming from different contexts. I think that work is actually surprisingly important. The highly complex work, I'm not even sure is the most valuable work at every moment. I don't like being discouraging of anyone being called to do certain types of activity. And indeed, the hardest parts of communicating about carbon removal are very important, especially when they are nerdy, esoteric, scientific, or policy points that seemingly are small, but are actually a major fulcrum. That work is super valuable. But one thing that gets overlooked is just like remaking the case for why people should care about this, whether they're focused on a policy, academic, or business audience. All those audiences need to be reminded from time and again, from different points of view and ways of communicating, that carbon removal is very important. In fact, all climate action is very important. And here's why, and here's how you can act on it. I think Marian and Benedict's book is a very nice reintroduction of these themes. It's had some success in getting into the hands of policymakers and staffers there, as well as executives at business organizations who are thinking about how to become a more regenerative, how to become a more carbon negative company. I find it to be a very clear book and would recommend it. Especially those two groups I just named, people who work at companies that maybe have a sustainability department or initiatives or maybe could in the future, or policymakers and staffers who are either now thinking about carbon removal or maybe in the future. Getting into the hands of those people would be a really important thing. And if you're listening and you are actually one of those people, you should pick up a copy of the book. It comes out on August 4th. You should pre-order it or get a copy of it. It helps if you do this sooner. That way it helps it rise in the ranking of books and it helps get carbon removal to a larger audience. I hope you enjoy. We use the book as a jumping off point, but then you basically get to explore Marian's brain as we talk about so many topics about how carbon removal goes to market in different geographies, about whether or not more extreme climate interventions are coming, what that says about morale within the carbon removal sector as a whole. Marian is one of those people too, as an ecosystem player, that has a great deal of visibility into what is coming next, especially working with early stage companies. You basically get to see what is coming 1 to 3 years from now as those companies mature. And then before you know it, they have a major offtake. And you're like, wow, I didn't even know this was a type of carbon removal. And it turns out, yes, it is. And likely Marian and people who work in similar types of ecosystem organizations have known about it for a while. So I love talking to people like that. I think Marian's work is great. Really powerful communicator. Before I cut to the show with Marian, a very quick plea that if you can please give a great rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for Reversing Climate Change. It helps to get the show to more people, and I would greatly appreciate it. And also, $5 a month to become a paid subscriber. Link is in the show notes. You no longer get the automated ads. You get bonus content, and you have my sincere thanks for helping make this a thing that can continue. In any case, I'm just glad you're here no matter what, and thanks for listening. Here is the show with Marian Krueger. You didn't write this book with me in mind, Marian?
I did not. To be fair, I don't think I could add anything to your carbon removal knowledge, Ross.
Oh, you flatter me, but actually I love rereading introductory texts because I often feel that I've missed things or things that I learned years ago and have forgotten about. I'm like, oh yes, it's nice to have a new walkthrough of the origins of carbon markets, or how exactly did the mechanics of the SBTI debacle play out? And I actually like regrounding myself every once in a while. I like approaching things with a beginner's mind. Without it, I think you start saying things. Do you have like a spiel about basically everything? And if people ask you the question, you say the thing. Yeah. And I think you need to intentionally break those every once in a while. Be like, do I need to update this? Is this deeply out of date? So,
I agree. Yeah. And to be fair, that's something that I struggled with writing this book, because knowing how fast the CR market evolves, or the space evolves, I knew from the moment where we sent the book to the publisher, the day after it's going to be out of date, or parts of it are going to be out of date. Right. And accepting that was actually not so easy at the beginning.
Don't feel too bad. That's literally every book that is published. And I talk to authors a lot, and they all say that same thing too. Yeah, by the time you write it, by the time it's copy edited and it's gone to the publisher, it could be, a year, 18 months until it's sold. And for something like climate, you see how much chatter there is. There's also a question of how much of that chatter on a daily basis is noise versus signal. And maybe the truths that you discuss in your book hold fast through the chatter. I don't know, but I imagine there's parts of the book that you read or you reread now and you wonder, if you had the chance, would you change or would you update? Are there parts of the book that torture you now?
Torture is a hard word. I think in the book we highlight a few startups to illustrate the various carbon removal pathways, right? And there are some that by now have folded, for instance. That's just the nature of startups, and especially in climate, and yet again in carbon removal even more so, right? But looking back, of course, if I'm now a sustainability leader at a corporate, looking at this book and seeing this one startup name, and I look for it online and I can't find it, not the best look. But to be fair, that's just the reality of the space we're in, right? So I actually, because it's because of the publishing process, indeed, as you say, it takes a while from manuscript submitted to the publisher to it actually being like in my hand. I reread it as well prior to our interview, and yeah, I had the same, feeling like you did. It sometimes is helpful to revert back to the things that really form the basis, and also, make you aware of why you're in the space in the first place, and what are the basic principles of us operating the space. Because in the daily hustle and bustle and all the noises, you sometimes forget.
Why spend at least some portion of your career here, Marian? It's a weird space, difficult. It's more difficult now than it was previously, I think. Maybe you disagree with that characterization. But why are we here? Maybe you could answer some of those questions, and alongside what are the general principles of CDR? It sounds so formal. The 3 rules of CDR.
Well, I guess the first principle, and that is why the two of us, I assume, are here, is because we need it, and we need a heck of a lot of it.
Yeah, I think that covers it. Yeah.
Right? I think maybe it's that one principle, and then everything else follows after of how we're going to do it, ideally in a safe, equitable, and as cost-efficient way as possible. But really, the premise of why I went to this space is because it is one of the most relevant and most, I think, under-supported pieces of the climate puzzle.
And it grew out of ETH Zurich. It sounds like your co-author, you two know each other from there. I know Remove is still associated with the university. What's the relationship between these institutions in this book?
Yeah, exactly. So the book started when I was leading a think tank at ETH, which mostly consulted hard-to-abate sectors in Europe and the Swiss government and a few other governments. And my co-author, Ben, was a postdoc at ETH, looking at a lot of the similar questions that we were looking at, but just from an academic perspective. I'm far of the academic side. I used to be an entrepreneur myself in startups, and that's the language I speak, and that's the speed that I operate at, certainly not the academic speed. And, we were, because of us being out there and consulting corporates, as well as other institutions, we were asked a lot about, there's this new thing called carbon removal. This is 2020, 2021. Can you help us understand this? Or can you point us to resources? And back then, I could point them towards the primer, the CR primer, which is great. But if you are a CSO or a CSR department employee and have had your last interaction with chemistry, biology, physics, let alone a combination of all of them in 10th grade, then the primer isn't a good start for you, right? So we felt like there was a gap, and my co-author had already written a few narrative nonfiction books on, for instance, sustainable investing in the past. So you just said, hey, this is a medium that works to, I guess, introduce an audience unfamiliar with something to a level that then afterwards they can go and look for the resources or the people themselves to further their journey. And that was really the start. And since then, as you said, I moved on to Remove, which started at ETH, the nonprofit accelerator that I run. And Ben has since moved on to the Max Planck Institute in Munich, where he does similar research that he's doing now. But what unites us still is, the passion for and work on carbon removal.
The McDonald's snack wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch snack wrap. Spicy snack wrap. You broke the internet for a snack. Snack wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This episode is brought to you by Hyundai. Get into the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event and get away with a deal so right, it almost feels wrong. Because right now, you can save big on their most popular models, including SUVs like the Hyundai Santa Fe and Santa Fe Hybrid, and the all-electric Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 6. The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Visit HyundaiUSA.com. Offers end September 2nd, 2025.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
I have a question about the mechanics of book publishing, because I suspect not a few people have an inkling that they'd like to write a book at some point. I've not written one, but I've been involved in the creation of several anthologies, which people think sounds easier in the same way that making documentaries sounds easier because you just record what happens or you take what is, but it is absolutely not the case, by the way. If anyone ever tries to trick you into editing an anthology, do not take the bait. You have to manage so many stakeholders and they all hate each other half the time. They're like, I won't be in it if this person has an essay in this, and I don't want. So it's more diplomatic than maybe you think. But I think people think that writing a book is a career maker or something that can be really valuable to them. I'm sure in some cases it is, but it's also an enormous amount of work to say anything new or newish enough to be worth saying in the first place. Do you find that the book was worth it for you? I suspect there's probably no way to answer that in public without embarrassing yourself if the case is no. But I don't know, maybe be real with me. Has the reaction been something that you've been pleased with? Are you happy to have done this enormous project?
Yes, I'm happy, but I think it depends on the perspective you look at it from, right? I think there's people that have writing a book on their bucket list, and then there's people that don't. I was part of the latter group. It was never something that ever occurred to me as something that would make me more relevant or make me feel better about myself. But this opportunity just arose, and I really did it because I wanted to progress the space. Now, if I looked at it from, if I was part of the former group that considered this something that enhanced my career or even an economic opportunity, hell, I failed. Because let me tell you, like writing a book for a niche audience about a niche topic, at first in a region that's essentially 3 countries because the language was German, that certainly is not a moneymaker. Probably even the contrary, because if you want to be nice, it's not just that your time that you spend into it, but you might want to have illustrations. And if publishers, and I'm not saying that this was the case here, but if publishers in general don't agree that illustrations would be nice, well, guess who's paying for those illustrations?
Wow. Okay.
But at the same time, it was a very rewarding experience as well, because I think coming back to what we said earlier, the carbon removal space is moving so quickly and you get lost in the day-to-day hustle and bustle. And a hot take here, a hot take there. This forced me and Ben into a completely different mode of operation, right? You actually sit down and distill the things that actually don't change, that will stand the test of time. And then I think what we were also very grateful for, or are grateful for, is that it is not necessarily only our takes that you find in there, but we spoke to 30, 35, 40 carbon removal leaders in the various things that we're looking at, markets, policy, regulations, the individual startups in every pathway, academics in those pathways. And I think the book really reflects more their work and their expertise. And our work, or our task, was synthesizing that and putting it in a form that ideally people don't close the book after two pages.
I didn't feel that way. And that's good.
It took you 3 or 4 pages.
It took me 3 or 4 pages before I was like, I've had enough. I imagine part of the reason for writing it, as you say, is to help the industry along, to help explain why carbon removal is necessary to people who maybe don't know this already. I suspect at least part of it is a desire to generate inbound for either friends of yours, colleagues of yours, for removes, maybe entrepreneurs who don't know about carbon removal and now they want to start a company in it and they come through one of Remove's programs. Has there been much traction on that side? Do you think, at least from the German-speaking world, it's only in German and now in English, right? It's just those two? Exactly.
We haven't thought about, Mandarin yet. Maybe that's a good one, although I assume context is different. CR in China is a bit of a black box to me, I have to admit, but maybe that's one.
Remove China. That's the next one.
The next frontier. Well, let's see about that. To your question, I think it was never the idea about this being a direct feeder to a Remove program, because I think the time lag of someone reading the book and then deciding to start a company and then eventually ending up at Remove is quite a long one. And I think what we have seen as success is, especially in the German-speaking country, because that's where the book has been now out for a year and a half, quite some interest on the policy side and quite some interest on the corporate side, where because of the book, we've been asked to maybe join for a corporate offsite of the sustainability team and talk to them about carbon removal. And that's exactly what we want to do, right? And we were able to officially launch it at the German parliament with German members of parliament there. And this, of course, and then, of course, you hand them a book, right? Whether they're going to read it or one of their aides, in my mind, it doesn't matter. At least one of them in that office reads it. And if only the tiniest bit of that trickles down, namely, we need carbon removal and it's a long way to go, that's already, I think, the job well done for the book.
Getting into the hands of a political aide, of an elected official, or even an unelected one that's sufficiently advanced in their career, still a big deal for carbon removal, especially when that is not always the case. It does not always feel super well understood. That's cool. That's a lot of uptake, maybe more than I might have anticipated.
So is that you cryptically saying you didn't like the book?
No, not at all. I think because producing any kind of content is difficult to get people to want to read it. Written stuff is easier for people to pass through quickly. So they'll read an article before they'll listen to a podcast most of the time because they can just skim it and be like, am I interested in this or not? And skip it. And a podcast requires an extra leap of, I'm going to download this thing. I'm going to put it on. I'm going to be on a drive or dishes and it's going to be hard for me to change. And I'm committing to putting this on. A book is harder though than all of those things. They often have to buy it or get it from the library and wait for it and then pick it up. And then once they're reading it, you have to stare at, ink on dead trees for hours at a time by yourself in a quiet space. And who has that time and luxury anymore? So and then very busy people, politicians or their aides who are conceivably busier than the politicians themselves, or even just people who work in corporate social responsibility at big companies. Those are not easy jobs. Typically, a lot of stakeholders.
They're not. Maybe I'm delusional and thinking just because they had it in their hand, they actually read it, and maybe it just ended up in the trash can or whatever. To be fair, I think, in all honesty, beyond them actually reading the book, I think what having written a book and publish it with a reputable publisher gives you is a reason to believe that you know what you're talking about, and that certainly opens doors or might entice a policymaker, an aide, to actually listen to you. And if it's only that, that's a hell of a lot of work to get that stamp of approval. Probably something else could get you that as well. But I think that is also a part in it, for sure. At least in my personal experience of pre-book and post-book, how I've been approached by people like that.
Yeah, you're an author now. And
yeah.
That shows some amount of dedication. Whereas if you're just a podcaster, you're like, okay, if you get 3 white guys in a room, there's 5 podcasts. Like it's not that unusual to have a podcast anymore. A book though, you had to stare at your computer for a very long time. I've written screenplays. I've not written novels. I've not written nonfiction at that length, but writing feature-length screenplays, I've gone crazy by the end of basically all of them. I'm like, does this even make sense? Does this all fit together? There's so many moving pieces. The more you write, the more variables and interactions there are to account for. It's super difficult. And by the time I submitted them, I'd always be like, oh, thank God I'm done. Okay, it's out of my brain for now, because it's not easy to do any sort of dedicated writing like that. It has a glamorous appeal to it, being an author, but maybe less fun than people think.
Yeah, especially, and I think, we were lucky in the sense that carbon removal really is our passion, and I couldn't be working in any other industry right now. So the people that we were interviewing are the people that I would be, I'd love to speak anyways. It was just that we hit record, and probably that conversation we're having right now, right? It doesn't really feel like work. What did feel like work is then, evenings and vacations spent actually writing that down. But still, I couldn't imagine if I wrote a book for a complete random topic. I think you'd need to be made for that to a degree, which I don't know. I don't think I am.
Well, why are we made for carbon removal? There's lots of things we could be doing. I came here by accident, and now I'm just deeply, deeply obsessed. And I don't know that I could leave if I even wanted to or could. So why are we here? What is so captivating about carbon removal?
I think it's, besides the fact that we of course need it, and if we, IPCC, we all know this. I think it's the promise of undoing all the bad we as humanity have done. And the straightforward nature of it. Of course, we all know it's not straightforward to develop an electrochemical DAC solution and deploy it and scale it up from 1,000 tons to 10,000 to 100,000, right? We know this. But conceptually, there is a problem, too much CO2 in the atmosphere, and there's a direct solution to alleviate that. I think that simplicity is what draws people.
That was a big part of Nori's early intellectual history too. Of, what if we could just, instead of making climate change less bad, we could actually reverse it. We put emissions up. What if we could take emissions down? Conceptually, it's so tight. But as you lampoon the idea right after you say it. Like you say it, like you love the simplicity, and then you make fun of electrochemistry. Like it is none of those things. Should we maybe update the story? Is this one of those old stories of CDR that is nice for getting people into the space, but is maybe a trap, maybe misleading them in some way? It's none of those things. Now that I'm in it, I feel like I have to think constantly. It's like the hardest set of problems I've ever had to think about. And I still don't even feel like I halfway understand half of this stuff. So it can't possibly be as you just said.
And you have a philosophy background that you're used to thinking about hard stuff. So
yeah, that's true. And I can tell like really fun stories about it and be an entertaining communicator, but it's also like, I don't want to trap people into taking because a simple story is the good one to tell in some cases. And it certainly helps explain why CDR is important, but also it can be deeply misleading because just look at all the ink that gets spilled over what are the correct bounds to set around carbon removal processes? And when is this actually avoidance or not? Is biogenic carbon removal anything but an avoidance? Like, I don't know. Like, if you use like alkalinity in wastewater treatment, is that resulting in net carbon removal? I don't know. The very smart scientists are talking about it constantly. It's like this like straight up, straight down solution. I wonder if that's actually, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm trying to ask you?
Yes, I understand. No, I understand. I think there's two answers to this. probably three. First one is, I think it being hard and complex serves a bit as a filter in the sense that, and I don't mean this in sort of only the strong or smartest survive kind of sense, but there is a time in the trajectory of innovations that where it's the hardest and where only a certain type of people are the ones that can move this forward. And I think those are the people that can deal with this complexity, that can grapple with questions, that can also accept ambiguity and maybe not have a clear enough answer. They're not crazy enough to start a carbon removal company in this day and age with a product that no one really needs, with the opposite of strong policy or investor tailwinds, right? So I think it serves a bit as a filter, and that will change. So that's the second thing, second part to my answer. I think there's a temporal sequence to the type of people that carbon removal will draw. And I think the third one is why. I mean, I think I saw your face and being a bit surprised about that. So how I think about this is, right now, not to put us on a pedestal, it needs crazy minds like us. But as we scale, it also, people that consider removal more than a job, like a real passion, if not obsession. And then as we move along towards scale, that's when carbon removal needs to become a 9-to-5 job for people that probably at this point couldn't stand the complexity. And that's okay, right? That's okay. And the third one is, you said it nicely, the question of, is biogenic carbon removal actually carbon removal, or is it just an avoidance? That's for the smart academics to solve for. I think sometimes the carbon removal, and I know this from myself, I have the tendency to try to find answers to everything. Because that's how carbon removal started. Back in 2020 or back in 2016, 17, it was quote unquote simple enough, or there were so many unknowns that you could still know the answers to all the questions, or at least have the feeling that you do. That's changed. And that's good because we've progressed in our thinking, but it also means complexity has increased, and it's impossible for you to be able to answer a question, just like for me, and just like for really everyone except for maybe Robert Turglund.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
Empower. Tim collects bobbleheads. A lot of bobbleheads. Baseball bobbleheads, race car bobbleheads, little chihuahua bobbleheads. He's got an entire room strictly for bobbleheads. Does he need them? No. Is his wife mad about it? A little. But Tim works with Empower, and he got good at money, so he can be a little bad. Ooh, horse bobblehead. Classy, Tim. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Welcome to Sephora. I'm looking for a perfume that's not too perfumey. I got you.
Serum moisturizer or moisturizer serum.
Let's get into layering.
My concealer is making me look worse.
Sounds like the wrong shade. Let's get you matched.
There's only one store that really gets what you're going for. Get beauty from people who get beauty. Only at Sephora.
Hi, Let's get you a basket.
Okay. Wow, there's so much
Do you
there.
agree?
Good answer. Yeah, no, there's a lot of smart comments in there. I especially like the theory of ecological succession that you point out for entrepreneurs. Like, okay, you have the sort of like pathfinder species that are going first, and maybe that's the truly crazy people. And maybe that's also why you find a fair number of cranks in CDR too. I'll take meetings sometimes where I'm like, that idea is fringier than I'm comfortable with. Let's put it that way. I think anything that's on the fringe like that is going to attract it. I do like that. I go back and forth about it too, because I think entrepreneurship needs a fair amount of humility baked into it too. But I think too much of it, you'd probably lose some of those initial people who are taking like really wild stabs at frontier tech. And I don't know how to balance both of those things. It's like, I'm wondering, maybe am I maybe part of the secondary cohort of the succession tree? Like maybe I'm not going to be the first one in, but I'm like a really good second person in. That's a kind of a question that I'm thinking about personally as a result of your comments.
Right. I think looking at when you started, you are probably prior to the first cohort even, right? I mean, you were one of the, like, when 2016 is when you started Nori? 2017?
2017. That's true, but a lot of those initial ideas I can't take credit for. I was there for, but I was sort of tapped to join the company. So I can't say those early ideas were just all me or something.
Okay. So you just said we need more humility in the space, and then you exactly showcase that quality. That's a nice one.
Kinda, yeah.
I see that.
My job is oftentimes to be the consigliere, to be the person who talks the people out of maybe some of the ideas that are visionary, but they're visionary in the wrong direction, or there's risk that is not likely to lead in a good, positive, asymmetric way, but just be downside risk that's potentially unlimited. Don't take those bets. So
to be fair, I think it's something that we have seen over the course of Remove, right? So it's now been 160 startups that have gone through the program, and the majority of them in Europe. So in a very mature ecosystem, both with regards to CR, but also in terms of entrepreneurship. And when we started 2021, you had the pioneers that were really doing it for the impact, right? That only second or third, in the second or third place, thought about whether this could eventually turn to a business. And then I would say like 22, 23, that's when the entrepreneurs from other adjacent climate tech or clean tech fields started pouring. And then beyond that, also just from, in Europe, it's London, it's Berlin, it's Munich, where they maybe had worked as a SaaS company before, and now we're looking to pivot to CDR. And those, I struggle with ranking them because, if you have kids, you like all of them alike. But in terms of like entrepreneurship potential and capacity, the second and third tier were the ones that surely were more strong on their entrepreneurship capacity, because a lot of times they had found it before. They had made the experience. Whereas the others, a lot of times, were first-time founders, maybe straight out of the university, that had developed an interesting removal pathway that they were now looking to commercialize. The others, really looking at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, thought, okay, there's tailwinds behind this. I think I can find some tech and commercialize it. With all that I've learned from, building, this is hypothetical, building 10 minutes Asian grocery delivery in Berlin.
I certainly looked at the follow-on companies after Nori and saw what they were doing differently from us, as well as the legacy registries and offset players that preceded Nori, and thought they were really smart. Like, I watched what Isometric did and was very intrigued by it. I was like, we tried to be all things to all people in a way. We were trying to be a vertically integrated carbon removal marketplace and registry, and there's even like a quasi project development component of that where we're generating our own credits, which put us out of step with ICROA and ICVCM. And it was nice to see others who are just like, yeah, we're going to accept the rules basically as written and then just focus, hyper specialize and be the very best at this one thing. It's like, wow, that's a go-to-market that we did not have the luxury of, especially because when we came in, it was a bunch of weirdos talking about SRM and CDR at the same table and being like, what if we had this? There wasn't a whole lot of information to make decisions about that early. People think going first gives you a great advantage, but I looked at people like Carbon Future, founded several years after Nori, or Isometric several years after Nori, and being able to make decisions with a lot more information and not become path dependent upon certain choices. And that is a luxury. So if you are an entrepreneur, I wouldn't just look at a space and be like, what are they all path dependent on that is no longer true? And I'm going to make a new bet. That's probably what I would do if I started another company, rather than being like, what's the next fringe thing that hasn't arrived yet? Because I don't want to go first again. I'm going to go second or third. I'm going to make like a really second or third company. I think that's what I'm going to do if I start another one.
Okay. What could that be in carbon removal?
I think what Residual is doing is awesome. So I really respect this business model of just like straightforward project development, have the chops, designing projects to be highly insurable, highly off-takeable, and working those relationships, probably already have several of them, and just going to market that way. I think carbon removal looked through the other end of the telescope for a long time, where you would be doing tech transfer offices at university, or like, what can we do? Oh, I have this idea for doing photo acids or something, you know, like, nothing against that. I think that's awesome too. But the idea of having people who are not necessarily the tech developers being the project developer as well, and then just maxing out on project development, I think that's a really cool business model. I also like what Offstream is doing and selling services to make this go-to-market process a lot easier. I think projects like that are very, very smart, and they're able to do a lot with lower labor costs. Like, I don't know, you don't necessarily have to hire 50 or 100 people to do all of these things in every case, or raise huge rounds and dilute yourself to oblivion. Curious what you would say, unless you're going to say my same answer, in which case.
First of all, I think I would agree, and I think that again is a sign of maturation of the space, that now you don't need to vertically integrate, but you can build horizontal business models, such as residual. I mean, of course, they start with biochar projects, but essentially you can develop any project. I think it's a very, very good sign. It's what we see in other industries as well, industries that we want to move towards. To your question, what would I think the whole carbon financing space around project financing is a very interesting one. At least for the time being, where we're in a voluntary setting. So I'm sure you know Kumo, for instance, other players are doing that as well, right? Those things I just see as very, very high leverage points. And similarly, those are horizontal plays. Those are not vertically integrated plays, which also allow you to maybe weather the storm that you might see in certain carbon removal pathways. Who knows what science will come out on one pathway, and if you're completely vertically integrated into that, you might have a hard time.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're gravitating at least partially, not just to the disaggregation of tech versus project development, but it's also for the shovel sellers, the debt servicing people. So yeah, if you're able to work with Structure Climate or Kumo, or others who are just trying to make sure that debt is accessible to startups, or as accessible as it can be. Concessionary capital blended with commercial capital, stuff like that is really cool too. It also is a tricky part of the market because it depends upon demand and a healthy ecosystem. But I guess everything does too. Like residual is just as vulnerable to that as anything else. Like,
what doesn't? What doesn't carbon removal?
Money. It's a stupid objection to make, but I guess it's because it's so facile. Maybe it needs to be made.
Yeah. I mean, again, if we at times make it very complex, but it's really as simple as demand creates supply, demand creates investment, and no demand creates the opposite of both.
What do you think of the big unusual bets in carbon removal, especially as we're looking at a time where cost is increasingly important, where policy and voluntary demand, maybe shaky. I kind of see both actually on the demand side. I see reports coming out saying that demand is just shifting to more high quality and we don't need to grumble as much about it. But whatever, I think it's a good time to be conservative. Sentiment, from what I hear, is not nearly as rosy as some of those reports might lead one to believe. Open question about how you should rate the data versus the more anecdotal stuff, and which is a lagging versus leading indicator, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
What do you think about some of these fringier ideas that maybe as the climate gets worse will become a new space for people who would otherwise be attracted to carbon removal for them to look into? I'm seeing people talk much more about short-lived pollutants, seeing more work on methane, refrigerants. I'm seeing more people talk about solar radiation management, and I'm seeing more chatter recently on ocean iron fertilization.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of these? Is this a sign of maturity, of desperation, of why is it happening right now? I think it's probably the latter, but you tell me.
I think it's disillusionment, healthy disillusionment, to be honest.
Ooh.
Of course, would I wish for the trajectory to always go up the way had been going up since 22, 23? Yes. But I think we would be setting ourselves up for an unhealthy, even bigger trough and even bigger abyss if that happened. Because I don't think the ecosystem was ready for it. So I think the phase that we're now in, as hard as it is, and we see it day in and day out with the startups that we coach, and so do you, Ross, it's going to be a tough time. It is about survival. It's certainly not about scaling these days for the vast majority. But I think it's, to a degree, healthy. We just need to make sure that enough of the current cohort survive until things are looking brighter again, ideally until compliance integration, however that might look like, is on the horizon. But I think that disillusionment causes us to now look at the models and think, hell, how confident are we that we can hit the growth curves that, IPCC and hence State of CDR report tells us we need? Or with every year that we do miss them, the slopes become even steeper. So we need to look. In my mind, it's the only logical and healthy thing to do is to look at the other things. Not in a, let's do this right now and deploy, but let's better understand the risks, because I am afraid there's scenarios where we need all the above of what you mentioned. And some might be more, we might be even already be more comfortable with, like doing them. Everything about methane, we might disagree on the global warming potential and how you account for that, et cetera, et cetera. But the general, I guess, way of working and how we can deal with it, I think is rather well understood. On SRM or in iron fertilization, well, there's a lot more research questions to be answered before we can even think about operationalizing it. But I think it's good that we do it. I don't think it takes away from carbon removal, because it is at such different stages of development or deployment even, that, yeah, I'm not concerned. Actually, happy about the activity in those fields. How do you think about it?
But did you say you are happy or you're not?
I am happy about it. Yeah, I am relieved if it's done in the right way. Making sunsets, the SRM company that just deployed balloons in Mexico, I'm sure you saw the article, I don't know, a year ago. That's not the way to do it. But I think by now everyone should have understood that. But how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that made basically everyone angry. I don't think I saw any positive reactions about fairly similarly. I've long admired Shuchi Talati's work in trying to make sure that we have robust and progressive frameworks for how to justly deploy solar radiation management when the time comes. I think the worst case scenario here is that we don't understand it and yet someone unilaterally does it, or we just all collectively decide to roll the dice on it, but we don't understand it very well. I think that would be pretty terrible. I don't even know if the moral hazard argument here applies so strongly. In fact, a lot of the data I've seen has shown that if you ask people about how they feel about deploying it, it encourages them to work harder to avoid the possibility rather than makes them more accepting of the fact that we're going to have to use SRM, which I don't know. I don't necessarily want us to be going down that road. It has a little bit of a, what the martingale betting strategy is?
No.
It's like if you're at a roulette table or something, and you bet on red and you miss, and then the next one you double your bet and you bet on red. It's like eventually you'll break even, or like some of this stuff just feels like it's martingaling, where you're like, cool, this is the disaster and likely to bankrupt us and be terrible. I do think it's good to soberly look at these things. I don't like the idea that we should never research any of these things or it will encourage bad behavior. And the only evidence I really have for that, I'm sure there's sociological evidence that is persuasive, but I know that I feel better when I stare the truth in the face and know it's a hard decision, but at least I have the data in front of me, and that can often cause behavioral change that is important. I think refusing to consider that we're going to go down this route, especially, are we not just poised to overshoot seemingly everything at this point? It just seems like the time to have argued this was potentially decades ago or 5 years ago, at least.
Yeah, it's a struggle I sometimes have with classic environmental activism and advocacy to, this probably phrased in the wrong way, but to rather die in dogmatic beauty than to survive in making some concessions on your principles.
And you were making fun of me for wanting to read Don Quixote and talk about its applications for carbon removal. Are you out of your mind?
Have I? No, not at all. Not at all. I'm very much looking forward to whatever output you have on Don Quixote.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
No, that was my point. That was my point, really.
Yeah, I hope we're going to be able to get a grip on all of this. It is interesting to see carbon removal return to its intellectual heritage to some extent, because for a long time there was this, so 2017, when I'm starting to hang around carbon removal circles, it does feel like the veil between geoengineering and carbon removal is quite thin. And then as carbon removal matured and mainstreamed, there was a really strong public relations effort to be like, oh, we're not a part of that. Even though we got David Keith over here, who's like a recognized master of both of those things and founded one of the most successful companies. Don't pay any attention to that. And then now looks like we're going right back to there, where a lot of the people who were interested in carbon removal, they've always been interested in these other climate interventions that have been a bit more fringe, mostly because I think, as you say, with ecological succession, they are the people that were most willing to entertain the farthest out ideas. And now that we're seeing potential catastrophe, more willingness from carbon removal people to return to those intellectual beginnings and say, well, maybe geoengineering solutions are more on the table now than they have been in the past. We were hoping to avoid it. The trajectory did not play out, and maybe that's coming back. I've been at conferences too, where like people at the table after a couple of drinks will be like, yeah, we all expect that to happen. Like, I'm like, really? Everyone here just thinks SRM is going to happen? Like the entire table? It wasn't even a controversial statement for this table?
Yeah, it's not even a hot take. I've had those conversations as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is probably a chance for carbon removal people to potentially even show more leadership on that, and to no longer be so precious about separating our industry from geoengineering, because we need to find a way to lead on those things responsibly in the same way that we did with carbon removal, just with riskier, higher leverage intervention. I don't even know if you agree with that. I'm just riffing on this for the first time, and it makes me uncomfortable to say, but I think it's likely to play a role in the future.
I would find it hard to disagree and make an argument to disagree. I think there's indeed a role for carbon removal to also inform of how we go about this, because I think, a lot of the questions about moral hazard and equitable and safe deployment, we have and are still grappling with in some CR pathways, right? I think what we've managed to deal with quite well is the moral hazard argument. It still comes up occasionally, but I think as a space we've managed quite well to find a way to deal with it, not push it away, but say, yeah, acknowledge that risk exists, but that there are safeguards in place of how to maybe mitigate that risk in the best way. And I think those learnings, to a degree, I think we can take over into the SRM space. And I've already seen some people that I used to work with in the CR space in 2020, 2021, more on the, say, research policy side, now having moved to the SRM space. Because I think, just like there are entrepreneurs who like 0 to 1, I think there's also policy and academic people who like 0 to 1. And maybe, carbon removal in those spaces has already moved to 1.5, and so they were looking to other things, which I appreciate, right? I appreciate that. I can understand it.
Without a doubt.
Probably there's going to be some way, and last thing I can say, and I've had it in the solar space as well, is I think at some point, probably the two of us are going to outgrow carbon removal as well. When at every conference, there's only going to be people, hopefully not just white men in black suits, making deals. That is demographically no success, economically success for me in carbon removal, but that's not mine anymore, right? I'm not sure about you, but then probably I'm on to something else. Yeah. I think that's a job well done for us, if I may say, if we get to that point.
Yeah, I think if I understand what you're saying is, the people that are maybe have the most amount of ability to take a big career risk and stick their neck out super far, like people like us. And there's a more diverse, well-rounded set of people afterwards. That would feel good.
I think we, of course, also enough privileged enough to be able to make those choices in a way that we, want to work on something that we feel aligns with our values and aligns with the way we like to work and with whom we like to work, right?
Yeah, it's a frustrating space to work in, though, where it has this Cassandra effect just built into it, too, where, like, we're probably not going to get on the right side of the overshoot equation. The world is going a different direction and not listening, and you're very well informed about this and watching it happen in slow motion. And I think that can be a rather grim prospect for people. I at least am able to compensate because having agency,
yes, 100%.
that feeling some, and also I find it to be endlessly engrossing in a way that, like, it's like a personal Rubik's Cube of a career choice, where I'm like, wow, I have to know not just the stuff that comes naturally to me, but several things that took me a long period of ignoring or putting on the back burner to be effective at this job. Like, I come from the world of humanities and was always suspicious of policy and found it to be a frustrating arena. Well, as an American, I think that's part of my national intellectual heritage to carry on and be like, oh, this industry is entirely dependent upon us, and quite a lot of details, boring details, tax credit details, and like hard scientific fringe work that I'm always still learning about. I feel like moving into just take a marketing job trying to sell a widget. I think like, what else can I do? I'm going to build you some Rube Goldberg machine in my free time, because otherwise I'm going to go nuts. Do you have that feeling too? What would you be doing if not this?
Honestly, I couldn't imagine. Probably, I mean, it would need to be something in impact and climate. There's no way I couldn't. There's, of course, so many other challenges in climate that I could be working on. I think it's two things for me always. It's the way of working, which is why I love the work at Remove. It's self-determined, it's value-driven, it's, we can decide with whom we work, on what, in what way. And the other one, of course, is what we work on, in the sense that the bigger picture, and that is carbon removal. There's plenty of other equally challenging problems to solve. I don't know, green ammonia scale up, and so many more. So I think to your question before, though, the fact that it does look grim, I think for the two of us, it might be enough to have agency. I would have used the exact same word. For me, it's the fact that I have agency that helps me deal with that. For the others, eventually, because the situation looks so grim, there will need to be a lot of money in this. I don't see a scenario where we're just going to continue to drive down towards the abyss and not pay any money for it, for wherever that money is coming from. And that needs to be driving people to come in, right? It needs to be the economic one. There's only so many people that go in because they require agency. Because people who needs agency? People that look at the problem. Yeah, sorry, but that's the case. If you're not looking, what do I need agency for? I have agency because I can continue to consume. Sorry, this goes somewhere completely else, but
it's not going to go somewhere completely else. It's written into the DNA of this podcast. What's going on with Remove right now? I've been loving being a startup coach at Remove. I love this work. I didn't expect to love this work as much as I have since Nori closed down, but I feel vocationally called to do it. I really like helping people in this way. Seemingly it's useful to them. But what is the plan for Remove? And also, why do this in a nonprofit way? I feel like you could probably take equity. Why this?
Yeah, first of all, we're very, very lucky and happy to have you on our team. So let me say that you found the vocational calling on that end. Why as a nonprofit? Maybe let me start with that. So when we were moving this out of university, out of ETH and TU Delft, we, of course, were faced with the question, do we do this as a for-profit and as a non-profit? And my co-founder and I both are entrepreneurs, right? So at least logical thing to think about would be to say, let's just raise a small fund here, take small equity tickets in the startups, and then we go from there. That's a classical accelerator way, right? That's Y Combinator, Techstars, you know them in and out. And then we looked at it a bit further, and what makes accelerator financial models work is if you can do follow-ons. So you do small tickets in all your startups, and then the winners, which you see after a year or after 1.5 years, you can do a follow-on. And that, just because of power law, is very attractive for you. The problem there is, if we supported 20 startups per cohort and we followed on 5, what signal does this send to the market? Remove, after having worked with these 20 startups for 6 months, decides that the other 15 are not worth investing in. How are other investors then supposed to feel comfortable in doing a ticket in them?
Interesting.
So that was one of the two things. The second one was, in classic, I guess, raising a fund and running a fund, you have 10 to 12 years, maybe 14 years max fund lifetime. Now, if we think about us going in at the very earliest stages, this might be a photo asset direct capture tech that's just coming out of university. Time to exit doesn't very well align with the fund lifetime. And this shouldn't be a reason why we don't support that startup. So we didn't want to put ourselves in a situation where we need to compromise on impact just for the sake of making the financials work. And once it's realized that, it was very clear this needs to be a nonprofit. Now, of course, this forces you to then fundraise, because essentially we always say we're fundamentally loss-making. And that's the nature of a nonprofit, right? So yeah, you need to fundraise. But interestingly, once we'd made that argument, fundraising became a lot easier, because people saw, okay, this is impact first, and they've really thought this through. So that's why we've done it in a nonprofit. We haven't looked back ever since. We're very, very happy with that decision. And what's on our plate right now? So we started up in Europe because Tito and Airminers, they're doing a great job on the US ecosystem already. And we felt like the European ecosystem needed building. And eventually, after I think this was more or less 100 startups in, we looked at ourselves in the market, and we were like, does it really make sense to push another 40 startups into a market that's barely able to sustain, maybe half, not even. And our resources not better spent in supporting ecosystems globally that are not at the point yet where the European or North American ecosystems are. So this then led us to say, okay, we're going to reduce our activities in Europe. We're still running a cohort, but just one, not two. And we started building a program in India. We started building a program with partners in Sub-Saharan Africa. We're looking at other geographies as well, because in those areas and those geographies, the carbon removal potential is so vast. In my mind, there's not going to be a scenario where we hit 10 gigatons, even 5, without the Global South playing a significant role in delivering massive amounts of that. But what I would wish for us to have learned from the past is this shouldn't be value extracting from the Global North. This should be local entrepreneurs maintaining most of the value in those ecosystems, because also this buys us a social license to operate there, right? Us as an ecosystem globally. So that's why, it's been India since last year, Sub-Saharan Africa since this year. This has been really our focus, and it's been also very, very interesting in making the learnings around how the carbon removal framing differs. In India, to put it very bluntly, no one cares about the climate impact of carbon removal. How you get into doors of policymakers or corporates is to say, well, actually, this carbon removal solution, be it enhanced weathering, be it biochar, which are really the two most predominant ones, it enhances crop yields. By doing so, secures income for smallhold farmers. It reduces air pollution by stopping stubble burning and dealing with biomass in a suitable way, and it provides jobs. That's the angle. India has a 2017 net zero target. They have a lot bigger fish to fry in climate and even beyond, right? And in Sub-Saharan Africa, we're seeing a similar thing. So, a lot of these, that keeps us busy in our thinking of how do we need to make sure that the narrative of the geographies is being told in the right way. And then maybe the last thing, what also keeps us busy is now that it's been in 160 startups. Of course, just because they leave our program doesn't mean that their challenges stop. And up until now, it's been them, coming into our inbox 2 years after the program, 3 years after the program. Can we jump on the call and help us? And unfortunately, right now, we are the bottlenecks for that, because at some point it's unfeasible to do. So we're also thinking about, okay, how can we continue to support these startups along their journey of surviving and eventually scaling? And a lot of the challenges we see here are around finance of early demonstration, first commercial, folk, if you will. So that's something else we're actively thinking about.
Fascinating. Cool to hear more. When's the next book coming out?
Well, maybe the Mandarin version is due. I need to maybe get a better grip on customer need there. Maybe do some customer discovery in the Chinese market on that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, Marian, thanks for being here with me. What a fun, wide-ranging conversation about all things CDR and beyond. I think we covered our entire industry.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say. So very happy to have me here.
All right.